The Huns, a nomadic confederation of Central Asian origin, emerged as a significant political and military force in Europe during the late 4th and early 5th centuries. Prior to the ascendance of Attila, the most renowned and feared leader of the Huns, the confederation was governed by a complicated succession of rulers. The Huns' rise to power was marked by a series of strategic alliances, military campaigns, and diplomatic maneuvers that shaped their interactions with neighboring societies, particularly the Roman Empire. This period of Hunnic history before Attila is what I'm here to discuss today. Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, it's good to meet you. If you're coming back, it's great to see you again. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to follow the links to the Patreon in the description and comments. Otherwise, if you feel inclined to like, comment, and subscribe, that's another way you can help me out. Now, without further ado, let's get on to the topic for today's video: a history of the Huns before Attila. The debate surrounding the origins of the Huns is characterized by a complex interplay of historical accounts, archaeological findings, and modern genetic research. While some scholars propose a connection between the Huns and the ancient Xiongnu people of Central Asia, others contend that evidence linking the two still remains inconclusive. One point of contention is the temporal gap between the decline of the Xiongnu and the appearance of the Huns in Greco-Roman sources. The Xiongnu, known as a significant nomadic power in Central Asia, were subdued by the Xianbei in the 2nd century AD, after which they completely vanish from the Chinese historical records. The emergence of the Huns in the West occurs around 200 years after this, leaving us with a chronological discrepancy that complicates our efforts to establish a direct link between the two groups. The Xiongnu, just quickly, were a group of barbarians from the steppe that harassed the Han Empire of China for many, many years, almost leading to their downfall. I have a full video on the Xiongnu if you want to go and take a look, but we'll get back to the Huns for today. Archaeological investigations have yielded some evidence, albeit limited, linking the material culture of the Huns to Eastern Central Asia. Some artifacts suggest potential cultural connections, but the overall picture remains murky, with significant gaps in the archaeological record, at least at the time of making this video. Which leads us to some genetic studies, which offer another avenue for exploring the origins of the Huns. Research focusing on the Carpathian Basin during the Hunnic period has revealed a diverse genetic landscape, with individuals exhibiting a range of genetic signatures. Some individuals show associations to Northeast Asian groups like the Xiongnu and the Xianbei, while others, well, they're more akin to European populations. However, the genetic data from this period is still relatively sparse, and it leaves us for a lot of room for further investigation and interpretation. If any discoveries are made, please remember that this video is made in the early months of 2024, so don't come and comment some 5 years later saying that I'm wrong if a new discovery is made. Now, references in ancient texts, well, they can add additional layers to the debate. Ptolemy's mention of a people called the Konoi in his geographical works has led to more speculation about their possible identification with the Huns. However, modern scholars remain divided on the issue, with some suggesting alternative interpretations or disputing the association altogether. Similarly, references to tribes like the Orogondoi and the Borogondoi in historical sources have been subject to their own interpretations. While some scholars have proposed links to the Huns, others suggest that they have connections to Germanic tribes, or even early Turkic ethnonyms. The sudden emergence of the Huns in historical records presents a bit of a puzzle for scholars, sparking various theories about their origins, but also their motivations. Their appearance in written sources suggests a relatively recent migration across the Volga River from the east, but the exact reason for their westward expansion, well, we simply do not know. Now, in terms of speculation, one possible explanation for the Huns' aggressive movements could be environmental factors such as climate change, with speculation about the drying up of pastoral lands in their original territories. Once again, the lack of concrete evidence makes this hypothesis difficult to conclusively prove. There is another theory that posits pressure from other nomadic groups, such as the Jojan, who may have pushed the Huns towards the west. A third possibility, and equally as likely, is simply the allure of wealth and resources in the prosperous Roman Empire and its territories. The Huns may have sought to exploit the riches of these new lands, prompting their westward pioneering advance. So, when did the Huns meet the Romans? Or rather, the Romans meet the Huns, as it's their sources that we're relying on. Well, they first encountered the Huns when the latter's invasion of the Pontic steppes forced the migration of numerous Gothic tribes to seek refuge within Roman borders. Reports also indicate earlier Hunnic raids in Transcaucasia, prompting decisive measures by the Eastern Roman and Sassanian empires. The initial targets of the Huns' military campaigns were the Alans, whom they defeated or subjugated in battles east of the Don River. Some historians suggest that rather than outright conquest, the Huns may have formed alliances with various Alanic groups, expanding their influence through diplomatic and military means. References in later sources, such as Jordanes, describe the Huns' conquest of other nomadic tribes in the region, potentially assimilating them into their expanding confederation. The figure of King Balamber, mentioned by Jordanes, remains a subject of debate, with some questioning his historicity at all, and others proposing alternate interpretations of his role within the broader Hunnic society. Either way, their expansion westward and their subsequent clashes with neighboring peoples played a pivotal role in reshaping the landscape of Eastern Europe during the tumultuous 4th century AD. As the Huns moved across the Pontic steppes, their incursions into the territories of other nomadic groups and settled societies sparked a series of conflicts and migrations that had far-reaching consequences. One, of course, that comes to mind, the Marcomannic Wars. The Huns' emergence in historical records coincided with their invasion of the lands inhabited by the Alans, the nomadic Eurasian people located to the east of the Don River. The Alans were unable to withstand the onslaught of the Huns. They were either subjugated or simply forced to flee across the Don River. This early success allowed the Huns to expand their sphere of influence and establish alliances with various Alanic groups, enhancing their military capabilities and resources. Following their victory over the Alans, the Huns turned their attention to another tribe, the Greuthungi, a branch of Eastern Goths who inhabited territories west of the Don River. Led by their king, Ermaneric, the Greuthungi initially resisted the Huns' advances. However, Ermaneric's eventual demise, whether through taking his own life or perhaps ritual sacrifice, left the Greuthungi vulnerable to further incursions. Vithimirus, Ermaneric's successor, attempted to enlist the aid of the Huns in repelling an invasion by the Alans, but he was ultimately killed in battle. With the Greuthungi now weakened and leaderless, many decided to submit to the authority of the Huns, while others, under the command of Alathius and Saphrax, sought refuge along the Dnestia River. Meanwhile, Athanaric, the leader of the Thervingi, or Western Goths, confronted the fleeing Greuthungi along the Dnestia. However, a clever maneuver by the Huns, attacking the Goths from the rear, forced Athanaric to retreat toward the Carpathian Mountains, leaving the Thervingi vulnerable to further attacks. Recognizing the inevitability of the Hunnic domain, most of the Thervingi sought asylum within the Roman Empire, crossing the lower Danube in 376. Emperor Valens, facing challenges on multiple fronts, allowed the Goths to settle within Roman territories, hoping to benefit from their military prowess and manpower. The influx of Gothic refugees, including the Greuthungi and other tribes, put a strain on Roman resources and exacerbated existing tensions within the empire. Food shortages and mistreatment by local authorities prompted the Goths to revolt against Roman rule, igniting a protracted conflict that would ensue for years to come. This period, following the Gothic War, saw the Huns continue to exert their influence across Eastern Europe, engaging in a complex web of alliances, conflicts, and migrations that further shaped the region's politics. Now, during the Gothic War, the Goths found themselves allied with a contingent of Huns and Alans, whose combined forces pressured the Romans into allowing the Goths to advance deeper into Thrace. Although the exact nature of the Hunnic involvement in this conflict remains somewhat unclear, intermittent mentions of their presence among Gothic allies suggest that they had a significant role. After the war, the Huns appear to have returned beyond the Danube, at least temporarily. In 381, they, along with the Sciri and Carpi, launched an unsuccessful attack on Pannonia, indicating their continued presence and military activities in the region. Theodosius I's subsequent peace treaty with the Goths in 382, which involved granting them land and cattle, aimed to create a buffer zone against further Hunnic incursions. Nevertheless, the Huns were undeterred and persisted in their raids and incursions into Roman territories. Between 384 and 385, they launched a raid into Scythia Minor, demonstrating their ongoing military engagements beyond the Danube. Meanwhile, waves of migrations, including that of the Greuthungi under Odotheus in 386, indicate the Huns' firm control over neighboring tribes. By the mid-4th century, the Huns had established a significant presence in Pannonia, potentially as foederati of the Romans, or as independent settlers. Their involvements as mercenaries in conflicts, such as Flavius Bauto's campaign against the Juthungi in 384, underscored their military prowess and strategic importance in the region. However, they had some greater ambitions, and of course this extended beyond mere mercenary work, as evidenced by their incursions into Gaul and conflicts with the Alemanni. The Huns' role as both allies and adversaries of the Eastern Roman Empire continued to remain complex and fluid. While they fought alongside Theodosius against Magnus Maximus in 388, they continued to pose a threat through their raids in the Balkans in 392. The Romans even attempted to employ Hunnic mercenaries against the Goths, highlighting the strategic value that was placed on their military capabilities. However, this relationship soured, leading to more conflicts between the Romans and the Huns in the Thrace region by 394, ultimately resulting in the suppression of the Hunnic presence in the region by 401. In the following year of 395, the Huns initiated their first large-scale attacks on the Roman Empire, marking a significant escalation in their aggressive expansion. During the summer of that year, one Hunnic force crossed the Caucasus Mountains into Asia, while another invaded Thrace and Dalmatia by crossing the frozen Danube in winter. Despite differing interpretations regarding the coordination of these events, collectively, there's no argument that they posed a formidable threat to Roman territories. The invasion of Asia witnessed multiple fronts, with Huns launching incursions into Armenia, Persia, and Roman provinces in Asia. While one group faced defeat at the hands of a Roman army after crossing the Euphrates, others, led by commanders Basich and Kursich, ventured down the river towards the Persian capital of Ctesiphon. Though one of these armies suffered defeat, the others managed to retreat successfully through the Derbent Pass. Concurrently, the Huns ravaged parts of Asia Minor, inflicting significant damage and threatening major cities like Antioch. The severity of the devastation was compounded by the Roman Empire's internal power struggles, which had diverted most military forces to the west. And it wasn't until 398 that Eutropius succeeded in assembling an army and restoring order in the province of Asia. Although it's unclear whether the Huns were defeated in battle or simply left on their own accord. While the raids into Asia Minor and Persia were indicative of the Huns' plundering intentions rather than territorial conquest, their motives were not solely driven by aggression. Priscus, writing later, suggests that famine on the steppes may have promoted the raids, indicating that resource scarcity played a role in their military campaigns. Additionally, Hun leaders Basic and Cursic's potential involvement as mercenaries in Rome in later years underscores a complex diplomatic and military interaction between the Huns and the Romans. Well, more raids marked the beginning of a prolonged period of Hunnic incursions into Armenian territories, with Armenian sources identifying a specific Hunnic tribe, the Zylandur, as recurrent perpetrators of attacks. The Huns' continued aggression in the region further destabilized Roman defenses and exacerbated tensions along the empire's eastern borders. Uldin emerges as a prominent figure among the Huns in contemporary sources, marking the first instance of a Hun identified by name. He held sway over territories in Muntenia, that's modern Romania east of the Olt River, and parts of Hungary, earning the title of Regulus, which in Latin means sub-king, from the Romans due to his perceived immense power. In the year 400, Uldin played a decisive role in the defeat of Gainas, a rebellious former Roman magister militum who sought refuge in Uldin's territory with a contingent of Goths. Uldin's victory over Gainas near Nove likely resulted in Gainas's death, underscored his military prowess and strategic significance. Moreover, his cooperation with the Romans during this period suggests a more nuanced approach to diplomacy as he expanded his influence over the Germanic tribes. The following years saw further displays of Uldin's military might and diplomatic maneuvers. In the year 406, Hunnic pressure prompted the migration of Vandals, Suebi, and Alans across the Rhine into Gaul, indicating Uldin's role in shaping regional dynamics. Concurrently, Uldin's Huns raided Thrace in the years 404 to 405, further asserting their presence within the region. Uldin's involvement with conflicts with the Roman Empire continued, notably during Radagasius's invasion of Italy in 405. Uldin's intervention, at the behest of Stilicho, resulted in the destruction of Radagasius's army near Faesulae, showcasing Uldin's capacity to suppress potential threats to his authority. However, following Stilicho's death in 408, Uldin shifted allegiance to Alaric, aiding him in his campaigns against the Romans. In 408, Uldin led a Hunnic incursion across the Danube, capturing the strategic fortress Castra Martis in Moesia. Despite attempts by the Roman commander in Thrace to negotiate a peace, Uldin's refusal and subsequent defections within his ranks weakened his position. Many of his commanders decided that it would be a much better position to simply defect to the Romans, leading to the disintegration of Uldin's forces, primarily composed at the time of Sciri and Germanic tribes. The Romans responded to Uldin's invasions by fortifying border defenses and strengthening fortifications at Constantinople. Additionally, Hunnic mercenaries, possibly provided by Uldin himself, played a significant role in Roman military affairs, serving as bodyguards to figures like Stilicho, and continuing to fight for the Romans against Alaric's forces. Amidst these tumultuous events, Flavius Aetius, the future Roman Magister Militum and adversary of Attila, spent time as a hostage among the Huns, further illustrating the complex play between Roman and Hunnic spheres of influence during this period. Well, after Uldin, historical sources on the Huns begin to get a little sparse. Around 412, or perhaps the following year, 413, the Roman statesman and writer Olympiodorus of Thebes embarked on an embassy to Charaton, described as the first of the kings among the Huns. Olympiodorus's account of this mission survives only in fragments, but it does shed some light on the diplomatic interactions between the Romans and Huns during this period. Now, the entire purpose of Olympiodorus's embassy was to appease Charaton following the death of a certain Donatus, who was allegedly unlawfully killed. Like I said, fragments, right? While some historians speculate that Donatus might have been a king of the Huns, others argue that his Roman name suggests that he was likely a Roman refugee that was simply living among the Huns. Well, whichever way it is, the exact location of the meeting between Olympiodorus and Charaton remains a mystery, with some suggesting it took place on the Pontic steppe due to Olympiodorus's sea voyage, while others propose Charaton resided in Pannonia. In addition to diplomatic affairs, the Huns continued their incursions into Thrace in 412, further highlighting their military activity in the region. These raids into Roman territory underscored the ongoing challenges posed by the Huns to the stability of the Eastern Roman Empire and its borders. However, beyond these scant references, details about the Huns' activities and leadership during this period are once again limited. And, well, we can only really speculate about them. After their earlier raids, the Huns, led by a leader named Ruger, launched another incursion in 422, and they managed to reach the walls of Constantinople. This attack compelled the Eastern Roman Empire to agree to pay an annual tribute to the Huns. Subsequently, in 424, the Huns fought alongside the Romans in North Africa, indicating a temporary alliance with the Western Roman Empire. However, tensions resurfaced in 425, when the Western Roman Magister Militum Aetius marched into Italy with a large force of Huns to confront the Eastern Empire. Despite initial hostilities, the campaign ended with reconciliation, and the Huns received gold before returning to their own territory. In 427, the Romans broke their alliance with the Huns and launched an attack on Pannonia, potentially reclaiming part of the region. The leadership dynamics among the Huns were complex to say the least at this period, with Ruga and his brother Octar emerging as the most prominent figures. Ruga is believed to have ruled the eastern lands of the Carpathians, while Octar controlled the territory to the north and west of the Carpathians. With Octar's death around 430, during a conflict with the Burgundians, it likely paved a way for his nephew, Attila, to power in the eastern Hunnic territories. Ruga's involvement in Roman affairs continued in 432, when he aided Aetius in regaining his position as Magister Militum. In 433, Aetius surrendered Pannonia Prima to Ruga, possibly as a gesture of gratitude for the Huns' support. However, tensions escalated once again when Ruga announced his intention to attack tribes that had sought refuge in Roman territory, leading to his death and the withdrawal of the Huns from Roman lands. Following the death of Ruga, the Hunnic Empire was passed into the hands of his nephews, Attila and Bleda. While Bleda is assumed to have held authority over the eastern territories, Attila governed the western regions. This arrangement allowed the Huns to assert their dominance over neighboring powers, notably demonstrated in the Treaty of Margus, signed with the Roman Empire in the year 435. The Treaty of Margus solidified the Huns' position. It did this by securing trade rights and increasing the annual tribute from the Romans. Additionally, the treaty obligated the Romans to surrender Hunnic refugees and fugitive tribes, consolidating the Huns' control over their dominion. In 437, Attila and Bleda fulfilled a commitment made by their predecessor, Ruga, to support Aetius in Gaul. Their intervention led to the destruction of the Burgundian kingdom on the Rhine and the suppression of the Baugadei rebellion. This military success further bolstered the Huns' reputation as formidable allies and formidable adversaries in the region. A year later, in 438, a contingent of Hunnic warriors joined forces with the Roman general Litorius in a failed siege of Toulouse. Concurrently, the Huns expanded their influence in Scythia and engaged in conflicts with the Sorosgi people, indicating their continued military engagements and territorial ambitions. Tensions between the Huns and the Roman Empire escalated in 440, when the Huns launched attacks on Roman territories during an annual trading fair. Citing Roman breaches of the territory, such as alleged plundering of Hunnic royal tombs by the Bishop of Margus, the Huns engaged in hostilities that culminated in the sack of several towns and the capture of Viminacium. Despite these acts of aggression, negotiations finally ensued, and they decided on a temporary truce, although further conflicts erupted in the subsequent years. Around 443 or 447, Attila assumed sole leadership of the Huns, potentially leading to increased aggression towards neighboring powers. By 444, tensions between the Huns and the Western Roman Empire had escalated to the brink of war. However, diplomatic efforts, possibly orchestrated by Cassiodorus, averted open conflict, leading to concessions to the Huns, including territorial gains along the Sava River, and Attila's appointment as Magister Militum with a stipend. And as we arrive to Attila, we end the part 1 of the Huns' history. Well, we almost end it. We have some time left to talk about the culture and some finer points of the Huns. So let's go into some of that, shall we? The Huns have often been depicted as pastoral nomads, sustaining themselves through herding and migrating with their livestock in the search of grazing lands. However, the evidence that we have may challenge this characterization, at least in its simplest terms. The term nomad somewhat oversimplifies their lifestyle. You see, the Huns, like other nomadic groups of the Eurasian steppe, had clearly defined territories and moved within these spaces in search of pasture. Typically, pastoral nomads alternate between summer pastures and winter quarters, with the latter remaining consistent. Jordanes describes the Hunnic Alzigari tribe as pasturing near Cherson on the Crimea, and then wintering further north in the Sivash region. Their herds comprised various animals, including cattle, horses, goats, and possibly sheep. Interestingly, there is some evidence that they brought with them Bactrian camels. Sheep bones are also frequently found in Hun period graves, indicating their significance in the herds. The majority of the Huns' diet consisted of meat from their livestock, particularly mutton, supplemented by sheep's cheese, milk, and horse meat. During times of scarcity, they may have resorted to consuming horse blood. Ancient sources uniformly deny that the Huns practiced agriculture, but there is some archaeological evidence that suggests at least some degree of agricultural activity among the steppe nomad populations. As nomads, the Huns were of course highly skilled equestrians, spending much of their time on horseback. Roman sources described them as inseparable from their horses, often living, sleeping, and even raising children on horseback. Despite Roman depictions of their horses as unattractive, the exact breed remains uncertain, though it is speculated to be a type of Mongolian pony. Horse remains are notably absent from the identified Hun burials, leading to speculation that they predominantly rode geldings based on anthropological and archaeological findings. Now onto the government structure of the Huns, which has been another topic of scholarly debate. Some do argue that the Huns were initially a loose confederation with leaders acting independently, while others contend that they were more organized with an almost centralized power, resembling other steppe empires. It is suggested that the Huns initially ranked a hierarchy, but eventually developed one quite similar to their surrounding Germanic societies. There is an absence of named Hun leaders until Uldin, indicating their initial unimportance. Permanent kingship emerged with the Huns' invasion of Europe and constant warfare. However, some modern observers describe Hunnic rule under Attila as more of a confederacy rather than a state or an empire, at least in the terms we would use them. A Roman source, Ammianus Marcellinus, mentions that the Huns did not have kings, but rather groups of leading men for times of war. These leading men had limited power and likely did not inherit their positions. However, it's been argued that Ammianus's statement may refer to the absence of a single ruler, as other sources mention multiple Hunnic kings. And on to that first Hunnic named ruler, Uldin. Well, he disappeared after that unsuccessful war, and this suggests a kind of transient quality to Hunnic kinship. It's proposed that Uldin was actually not a name, but a title, indicating a sub-king rather than a permanent ruler. Some have referred to Attila as a king or an emperor, but his native title remains unknown. Attila later appointed his son Elac as co-king, and has suggested that the Huns eventually adopted a system of ranked kings, but this came after Attila. Now, the source of Priscus also mentions picked men in Attila's government, suggesting their importance in the Hunnic administration. It's also argued that these individuals played a crucial role in governing the empire, overseeing detachments of the army and collecting tribute. However, these picked men may simply denote prominent individuals, without any fixed ranks. It's suggested that lower-ranking officials may have been responsible for tax collection and tribute, and unlike the Iranian Huns, the European Huns did not mint their own coins. Now here's something interesting. Artificial cranial deformation, changing the shape of your skull in layman's terms, a practice of lengthening the skulls at the back through binding, emerged in Europe on the Pontic steppe in the 2nd and 3rd centuries before spreading to the Carpathian Basin, where it became quite prevalent in the 5th century. During the Hun period, between 50 to 80% of all burials within the Carpathian Basin contained individuals with artificially elongated skulls. Scholars have linked this chronology and distribution to nomadic invasions in Asia, particularly the Huns, suggesting it was initially practiced by their nobility and later adopted by Germanic groups who were influenced by them, notably the Gepids. However, some argue that the practice was introduced by the Alans and Sarmatians, who were closely associated with the Huns. Also, some people in modern days have convinced themselves that this is proof of aliens being on Earth and guiding the hand of man through nefarious means. Well, I think that for argument's sake, we can perhaps dismiss that one, at least for the moment. The goal of artificial cranial deformation has been debated. While some suggest it aimed to create a physical distinction between nobility and commoners, others argue it served to indicate kingship and distinguish families. And it wasn't just the Huns doing this. They found it in Mesoamerica as well, and some other parts of the world. Seemed to be quite a popular look before our modern era. Now, as for language and linguistics within the Hun Empire, it wasn't just one, there was a variety of them that were spoken by a variety of different peoples. Priscus noted that the Hunnic language was different from others at Attila's court, where a mixture of Latin, Hunnish, and even Gothic was spoken. Scythian subjects spoke their own tongues, along with Hunnish and Gothic or Latin, with Gothic potentially serving as a lingua franca. The use of 4 languages at different governmental levels, Hunnic, Gothic, Latin, and Sarmatian, was also prevalent. The Hunnic language itself, well, that remains enigmatic, with only a few recorded works suggesting an Indo-European origin. Scholars have proposed, though, various classifications, including Turkic, Mongolic, Eastern Iranian, and Yanesian, though the corpus is once again limited. Now, regarding marriage and the role of women in general, well, the elite, they got to practice polygamy, while the commoners, well, they were likely mainly practicing monogamy. Contrary to Ammianus Marcellinus's claims of Hunnish women living in seclusion, Priscus's first-hand account depicts them freely interacting with men. Hunnic women were observed swarming around Attila, apparently, and playing active roles in social and domestic affairs, with some even holding positions of authority over small villages. The pastoral nature of the Huns' economy likely afforded women significant influence within the household. Well, the religion of the Huns, that's another thing that we don't quite have much information on, with limited and sometimes contradictory information from historical sources. Marcellinus suggested that the Huns had no religion, while Salvian classified them as pagans, albeit that is a very broad brush. Jordanes Getica mentioned the worship of the sword of Mars among the Huns, signifying Attila's right to rule. This practice is noted among other steppe peoples and may have held symbolic significance rather than actual literal worship. Some scholars argue that while the Huns themselves may not have regarded Attila as divine, some of his subject people likely did. Belief in prophecy and divination is also attested among the Huns, with some suggesting the presence of shamans conducting these practices. Additionally, there are indications of a belief in water spirits, and the possibility of small idols being made, although once again direct evidence is few and far between. The Huns may have worshipped the sky and the steppe deity Tengri, kind of like the Mongolians, while others note that the worship of trees and sacrifices to fire, water, and celestial bodies were among the Caucasian Huns. There is also mentions of human sacrifice, particularly in funerary rites, although its extent and frequency are uncertain. Hopefully not too many human sacrifices. Now, despite these pagan beliefs, there are also records of Huns converting to Christianity and receiving Christian missionaries, with, of course, varying degrees of success. Attila is said to have tolerated both Nicene and Arian Christianity among his subjects, although there are accounts of Christian slaves being forced to participate in Hunnic religious activities. Archaeological evidence related to the religion of the Huns is limited, but it does provide a few insights. For example, burial practices, including burning objects and the absence of kurgans, suggest a unique funerary custom that may have differed from those of other steppe peoples. The scarcity of Hun-related burials in the Carpathian Basin raises questions about their burial practices and material culture adoption. But once again, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Maybe we just need to find where the Huns were being buried, if they weren't just cremated. Overall, the religious beliefs and practices of the Huns remain a subject of ongoing research and debate. And until we find a little more, well, we're just gonna have to try and make it up as we go. But don't subject that to peer review. Well, thank you very much for listening to this brief history of the Huns and a little bit about their culture. Now, in the next video, I'm going to be talking about Attila and his impact on the world. Well, at least the Roman world. And I hope that you're looking forward to that as I'm looking forward to researching it and recording it and all the rest. I'd like to give a thank you and a shout out to my patron Stark Factory for his contribution to the channel, and if you would want to contribute as well, you need only follow the links in the description and comments over to my Patreon. If you don't want to do that, how about you subscribe and like the video? Leave your comments down below. That always helps. But until next time, I wish you all the best. Drink plenty of water, and rest well, everybody. Good night.